Everybody? Wow, I'm in a Baptist church this morning. Sweet. Couple things first, really quick. Like Melissa mentioned earlier, Daryl's on retreat this week. Much needed, much deserved, so prayers are with him. Second thing, I'm really excited about this. I say excited because I'm not allowed to say stoked anymore. Daryl called me on it last week, and my wife always bugs me about it, so I can't do it anymore. I'm excited if you're here for the Your Space series. Back before the holidays, we promised we would get through all of the extra questions that we had at the end of that series. That process has now finally started. We have a blog up. The website should be up behind me shortly. Yeah, there it is. So we got one question up right now. Hopefully we're going to get through the rest of them hopefully at a rate of about one a week. So if you want to be a part of that and be a part of that dialogue, log in, sign up, go to riverstatechurch.org/WordPress, and they're up there. So there we go. We're in week 2 of our series on Peter Scazzero's book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. The name for today's sermon is Knowing Yourself That You Might Know God. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like the title. I didn't pick it. It comes from the book. I find it a little bit misleading, and I'll explain why. In the book, Scazzero quotes John Calvin, who, if you don't know, is one of the most prominent figures in the Reformation back in the 1600s. And he quotes when he says this: "Our wisdom consists almost entirely of 2 parts, the knowledge of God and of ourselves. But as these are so connected together by many ties, it is not easy to determine which of the 2 precedes the other and gives birth to the other." What Calvin is saying is this: knowing God and knowing yourself are so interconnected that we don't know which one comes first. It's impossible. You can't figure it out. But I guess naming the sermon Knowing Yourself That You Might Know God, That You Might Know Yourself That You Might Know God is a little bit long, even though it might be a little more accurate. So we're going to stick with the one that's in the book. I'm sure Scazzero knows what he's talking about. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how about knowing yourself, and why that is important and helpful in coming to know God. First thing we need to do is deal with a little bit of baggage that Scazzero deals with in the book. He mentions his upbringing in the church and how a lot of when he was raised dealt with how emotion is bad. Your feelings are unreliable and you can't deal with it, so spiritually you just divorce yourself from your feelings and deal completely with your mind, and that's the way to go. And there's a little bit of truth in there, but if you cut out your emotion altogether, that's just as dangerous as buying into them altogether. Especially when you think about the bad emotions that we all deal with and face. When's the last time you were angry, sad, disgusted, lonely? When's the last time those feelings were directed at God? Did you know that's okay? Someone's freaking out. Someone's thinking, did he just say it's okay to be mad at God? Does Daryl know he's doing this? Yeah, I did. It's true, and I'll prove it. Have you ever read the Psalms? Like all of them? There's 150, all of them. What are they about mostly? Like, what are the ones that we know a little bit? The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. Right? Psalm 23. Everybody knows that one. Went through a couple more. I sought the Lord, and He answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Psalm 38. Let God arise, let His enemies be scattered, let them also that hate Him flee before Him. Psalm 68. We're going to do one more, and I got a couple of buddies from Heritage, and they know exactly what's coming when I say Psalm 88, verse 13 to 15, or sorry, 15 to 18. But I, O Lord, cry out to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me? Afflicted and close to death, I come from my youth up. I suffer your terrors, I am helpless. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dreadful assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in on me together. You have caused my beloved and my friend to shun me. My companions have become darkness. Yeah. Some of the translations actually ended off by saying, and darkness is my only friend. And guess what? About 2/3 of the Psalms are like that. They're called lament psalms, and King David himself wrote a bunch of them. Actually, Jesus even quotes David on the cross when he quotes Psalm 22, when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And yet, in Acts 13, Luke calls David a man after God's own heart. So David, we know, regularly cried out to God in anguish, pain, sometimes anger, and was still called a man after God's own heart. Now, that's not to say that David was in any respect perfect. He wasn't. I mean, any guy that cheats on his wife with another married woman and then gets her pregnant and then sends the husband off to war to get killed, yeah, not the best thing to do. But David was still known, after all of that, as a man after God's own heart. And the question is why? And the answer is because he knew who he was, and he knew who God was, and he knew what that meant. We're going to look a little bit at 1 Samuel chapter 17. Most of us know even at least a little bit about the story of David and Goliath. Even people who aren't Christians are raised with it and use kind of that imagery, like the David and Goliath metaphor, when they're dealing with something that's like insurmountable or almost impossible. So we're going to find out exactly how David got to be the guy with the sling in front of the giant, and then we're going to go from there. So I'm just going to read 1 Samuel 17, and then we're going to go. And David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And the people answered him in the same way, "So shall it be done to the man who kills him." Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, "Why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart. You have come to see the battle." And David said, "What have I done now? Was it not but a word?" And he turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. When the words that David spoke were heard and repeated before Saul, he sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." And Saul said to him, "David, you are not going to fight against this Philistine, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear, and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and struck him, and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." And David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, Lord be with you." I mean, really, what else is he going to say at this point? Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped the sword over his armor. And then he tried in vain to go, for he had not yet tested them. He's a shepherd boy. He never wore armor before. So David put them off, and he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in a shepherd's pouch. Put the sling in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. The Philistine moved forward and came near David with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come at me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Tough kid.